I think some of the best advice I've been given is to delegate as much as you can and make people accountable and responsible.
That's really good, isn't it?
But it is. If you empower people, then they feel bought into the whole endeavour, and then they will work for you a lot better.
Hello everyone, welcome to 11FS YouTube channel. I'm Sam Maule, I'm joined by David Brear. We're not in a studio today, if you haven't noticed. We're actually on board the HMS Dragon. This is a destroyer, probably the most kick-ass destroyer I personally have ever seen in my life, and even in my Navy career. We're in Manhattan, of all places, on Pier 88, and we're actually joined by the ship's captain, Commander Giles Palin. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Sam, and welcome on board. It's great to have you on board here in this fine city.
It is a fine city, and this is an incredibly fine ship. David, you're kind of jumping out of your shoes right now.
I am super excited, yeah. There's an amazing amount of buttons that I don't know what they do, and I really want to explore and find out what everything is. So
they're all taped over, and they say, David, don't touch.
No, they do, yeah. I promised.
So, Commander, if you don't mind, can you kind of give us an introduction to the ship? What is the HMS Dragon? What type of ship, and what's your mission?
So HMS Dragon is a Type 45 air defence destroyer. So her primary role is to defend not just herself, but a task group of ships from any kind of threat in the air, whether it be civilian aircraft getting in the way of aircraft carrier operations, or whether it be in more austere climates, missile attacks or air attacks from our adversaries. That's her primary role in life.
And suffice it to say, this is probably one of the most cutting-edge ships in any Navy across the world.
It is cutting edge. We're very proud of it. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased, but I'm pretty confident that there are other navies out there who are pretty jealous of what we've got here in terms of capability.
I literally walked up and went, ooh, this is badass. And I will go ahead and say that was the first thing I said when I came around and saw this. So one of the things we want to talk about, though, in your role as a captain of a ship, and we're talking about culture, right? We're talking about how you motivate and lead a team. I was explaining to the 11FS crew, on board a ship, the captain is God. It just are. I mean, it's all right. All right. This is what God looks like. If you ever wonder,
you can keep saying that if you like.
This is what God looks like.
I don't think they say that themselves.
But it is true. I mean, this is your responsibility. This is your world. And the crew, how many on board?
So we run around with about 230 people on board this ship. 230
people on board a cutting-edge, state-of-the-art warship, and that's what this is. So from a leadership position, when you look back at your naval career, because obviously you've been in for a while now, and you look back at the lessons that you learned as a leader, what stands out the most to you?
What stands out the most is how my sort of leadership style and how everyone's leadership style evolves as they gain more experience in their naval career. For me, I joined Dartmouth, I wouldn't like to mention, around about 20 odd years ago. And
studying law, right?
I studied law, yes, but then decided I actually wanted to go travelling, and this guy in a dark suit turned around to me at a careers fair and says, well, we pay you to go travelling, and that was 23 years ago, and I'm still here now. So wow. He's certainly living up to that promise. Anyway, so leadership, yeah. So when you join Dartmouth, you start off by giving some quite basic skills to set you out in your first jobs, which gives you the ability really to do sort of fairly direct, team-focused leadership. You can deliver a task, specific tasks, things like that. But as you go through your career, the more and more you gain experience, the more and more you realise that actually it's all about emotional intelligence. It's all about people. I think leadership is all about people and their ability to, and your ability to understand how each individual member of your team works, because everyone is different. No one glove fits all sort of thing. And so you've got to work out the best way of getting the most out of that individual person, and the more you understand people, the better you can lead them. I'm a firm believer in that. In terms of,
you're the second naval commander to say that to me in 2 days, because an old friend of mine that was on the sub with me was Mustang, and he's now a commander, a captain in the U.S. Navy, and he said the same thing. The thing he learned the most is EQ. So thankfully, 11FS, this is me now kissing up to David. But you do understand that component of it, right? Sure. EQ is incredibly important to lead a team.
Yeah, I mean, completely. I think it's, like you say, getting the best out of the individuals is what it's all about. But, I mean, how have you gone about that? Because obviously the more... there's one thing when you're running a business, you're in charge of people, but this is very different. You're in a much more, you don't have time to go and have a nice coffee around the corner and sort of learn about people. Like, this is much more intense, I would have thought, in terms of...
But by being cooped up in a steel box for 6-7 months at a time, you really do get to know people very, very well.
And
you know characters. Probably not as much as Submariners, but you're not far off. Yeah, so you really do get to understand people's characters, and I think it comes back to how much you empower people, and you can, once you empower people, you see how they work, and then you understand them better.
Well, and a big part of leadership is obviously trust. So how, because obviously here it's life and death. Theoretically, right? Actually the things that you're doing and the situations you're sort of facing into. So, I mean, how do you garner that trust from the people that you work with?
I think you need to. It comes back to what I was saying then. You need to empower people. You need to make people feel that they are responsible for what the ship is trying to achieve. The more you can sort of delegate down and empower people, the more they buy into the overall mission or the aim that you set out, and the more that everyone works together as a team, and you can trust them. I think open communications is key as well. Everyone thinks of the military as something that's very downward facing, and it's do what I say, do this, but that's quite a naive way of looking at things. If you don't have a two-way communication flow, you don't, as a leader, you don't allow people to challenge your own thinking, and you're in a very dangerous place then of just being set down one path when there are other probably better solutions. So open communications is a really good way for trusting people as well.
And I'd say, I mean, at the point where a command is kind of given, people need to trust you that you're doing the right thing as well, right? So there must be the prioritization around action that you start taking, because it's not in business. Very often it can be down to do people believe the thing that they're doing, and do they really sort of buy into the vision in terms of where they're going? But when action needs to be sort of taken from your position, then actually people have to really sort of get on board and get in line with it. I mean, how does that decision making sort of work? Is it very top down and hierarchical, or is it more? Because obviously do you say 220?
230, yeah, about 230 people on board.
I mean, you can't micromanage everybody at that stage, right?
So we have this this culture in the Navy, this leadership culture of what we call mission command, and it stems all the way back from Nelson's day, and he was the person who sort of first advocated this mission command, and it's the ability to set very quickly and very clearly the sort of direction and the output that you want your team to achieve, and you delegate that down to your heads of departments and your teams on board, and then once they've got that clear direction, they go out and deliver it to your aims. And then what we then do is rather than them coming back and seeking permission to do things, there's a regular back briefing saying, this is what I'm doing, I intend to do this, I intend to do that, and basically I shut up if I'm happy with the way they're going. But if the direction's going slightly off-piste, then it's a quick steer back onto the right direction, rather than them having to come and seek permission all the time to do stuff. It's sort of command by veto, if you like, rather than seeking permission all the time, and that gets them focused together.
I mean, that's great, because then you've got a lot of people who are, again, people who can take action themselves within the framework is the best place to be. We sort of say closely aligned, loosely coupled. It's very closely aligned on the vision and the mission in terms of what you set out to do, and then sort of loosely coupled in terms of how you actually achieve the thing, which is a fantastic. I wouldn't have thought that works in the business context, but obviously works in running something like this as well. So.
Yeah, I think having clear aims and objectives and a clear list of priorities as well is absolutely essential to get people all working towards the same goal, but also then gives them the freedom to go out and run their own teams as they see fit.
So how do you do that in terms of that communication then? What's the obviously, I mean, like in business, it's like everybody gets a Slack message or an email, but like how do you sort of disseminate information or priorities?
So we have a command aim. So as we sail, I will always promulgate a command aim. Over the last few months, we've been working with our new aircraft carrier, HMS Queen Elizabeth, and we are her air defence escort. So our mission is to protect her and the task group from any threats from the air. Whether in peacetime, whether it's just keeping civilian aircraft away from her operating envelope, or obviously in wartime, it's defending her against missile attack and things like that. So my mission and my command aim to my team is to command the air picture, command the air battle, and defend the carrier from those threats. And so everyone knows that's what we've got to achieve. So in order to do that, the engineers know that I need a lot of speed from the propulsion, so they need to keep all the plant available. My weapon engineers know that my air defence sensors, my radars, and my missile systems are the priority thing. So everyone knows how they've got to deliver to that same aim. So we set a clear a clear aim, and then underneath that, if there's prioritizations required, then I will also set out the number one priority is this, then this, then this, and that keeps people aligned to the same mission, if you like.
Didn't I read that you served on board the Queen Elizabeth?
Yeah. So I went from being bossing these ships around to being bossed around. So it's payback time now.
So you were the commander?
No, so I was commander navigation on the carrier. So I sort of that function really was sort of managing the task group maneuver. So putting the escorts in the right place, making sure they were delivering for the carrier.
I can't describe how complex that is because that's not a single ship. That is a group. That's a fleet group. That's massive amount of logistics and moving in a constant changing state of flux. So that's where I'm curious. So you served there and then came over here. What's the normal tour on this boat? How many years on the ship?
It's about 2 years.
Think about that. His crew is turning over every 3 years, or every 2 to 3 years. You're having constant turnover. So
yeah, and it's trickle feeding as well. We don't all join en masse, work up together and deploy. So we're constantly trickling new people in and the more experienced people leaving. That's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because it sort of keeps the corporate knowledge moving forward. So the ship progresses. You don't get these periods where you suddenly drop down in knowledge and you have to build it up again. But the downside is you get little pockets of inexperience dropping. You have to be really on top of that, making sure you don't have too many people in the same area leaving at once, so you suddenly have a drop down in capability. So that takes some careful management.
I mean, how do you manage that? Because obviously from a performance, again, the life and death scenario, like actually performance management isn't something that you can be like, well, they'll improve and they'll, we'll get it next time. These things are like life and death. So, I mean, how do you manage performance effectively?
So if we're going on operations, then we will try and sort of front load a lot of that sort of personnel change and bring people in before we go away. And then once we've got those people in, we then go through a period of collective training. So the ship goes through its own sort of training package. So we get external organisations to come and conduct training and assurance on us as well, to give us that tick that what we think, because we're always going to be biased. I'm always going to turn around to you and say, Dragon is the best ship in the Navy. You don't need to worry about us. We know what we're doing. But actually, you do need someone with a more of an objective mindset to come on here and just run a ruler over us. So we get that done before we go on operations, just to give our lords and commanders, that assurance that they're putting a ship out into theatre that is ready to do the jobs that it's tasked to do.
Well, I mean, it gives everybody confidence at that stage, doesn't it? And they must do it across multiple ships, so they're getting a good view of how people are actually sort of set out as well.
Yeah. And then if you go and work in the task group, they then go to the next level and they get the task group working together and make sure that we're all communicating well and so forth and operating as a team rather than as individual units.
How long is a normal deployment? Is there a normal deployment? I guess that's
never
a better
normal
question.
deployment.
No, there's not.
On average, they're about 6 months long. We've been through a period where they've been up to 9 months sometimes. We've actually, this one we're doing now is only 3 months. So it does vary, but on average, it's about 6 months.
So when you're doing a deployment of that time frame, how do you keep, I guess the best word is a sense of urgency with the crew? How do you keep them, I think we would say motivated. Right, at a startup?
That's a really good question. And we've had 2 examples of activity that we've been tasked to do over the last year, where one has been quite easy to keep people motivated and one is more of a challenge. So last year we did a long deployment away. We were doing counter-narcotics operations, lots of successful boarding operations, seizing contraband. That is a whole ship evolution. For everyone from all different departments are involved, whether they're part of the boarding team, whether they're part of the teams on board who process the contraband, whether they're the flights who go and find the vessels to board. Everyone is fully engaged in that, so everyone is bought into the mission and they can see a tangible output because you have successful boardings. Yeah. This year we're working as part of the carrier task group, where we are as I said, the air defence escort, and that is what this ship is designed to do. That's its core role. But it's very focused around my warfare operators, my operators in the ops room who operate the weapon systems and the sensors. So trying to get my engineers who are down in the engine rooms, or my caterers who are cooking the meals, and my writers in the ship's office who are doing all the administration, trying to get them bought into that task is harder. So it's trying to keep them appraised of what we're doing, give them context of why they are toiling away down there to keep the engines online and things like that.
So you brought up an excellent point. I'm so glad you went there in the question that David just asked you. When you were talking about the crew, you used the word caterers, which sounds so much better than the cooks, which we used to say on the boat. but they're an incredibly important part of the crew in keeping the crew motivated and keeping that going. And I love that you went from your caterers and the cooks on the boat all the way up to your warfare officers, including in them. So it's that concept of team that everybody on the ship is part of that.
Definitely.
That has to be a continuous thread, doesn't it, from a leadership standpoint?
Definitely, yeah. Because if you get part of the ship's company, you feel disengaged, then that element, because everyone is essential on board to make the ship work. And if they're disenfranchised or disengaged, then that element will fail. And taking the caterers, the chefs, the cooks, is if their morale's low because they don't feel like they're involved, that we're not going to eat very well, and then that morale really drops, because if sailors aren't being fed properly, then that's not good for people's morale. But it's really important that we keep everyone engaged.
And I like that I learned that you call them caterers, which sounds so much cooler. We used other names, and it had nothing to do with caterers. It usually involved 4 letters and some other stuff. One thing that really strikes me when we were taking a tour of the bridge is, one, the sheer level, the high level of technology that's surrounding us. And yet, what's the average age of your crew? I knew when I served, it was under 25.
Yeah,
it's about the normal.
It's about right, about 24. 24, I think, is the average age of the 65. And
So
I ruin that average quite significantly.
I ruined the average for 11FS, so that's all right. You laughed at that. That hurt. Our producer laughed at that.
I mean, how has that changed over your time in it? Because obviously, technology is advancing so quickly. The things that we're seeing around here are, definitely we wouldn't be seeing them in the ship across the way, right?
That's a good point. Actually, it has changed. The average age hasn't changed so much, but what we're finding now is that you've hit on a good point there, because the technical complexities of ships have increased almost exponentially in my time in the Navy. And that, for us, we're a pyramid society, so we recruit people at the bottom and they have to work their way up to positions of responsibility. But because ships are becoming more technically advanced, we need more of our ship's company to be technically experienced. And that's a challenge, to get them in and get them up to that level of experience quickly so they can deliver that effect. You go back to the days of battleships of World War I, where you had a huge shop floor, if you want, of people who able seamen who were doing that. We need more petty officers and chief petty officers now who've got that technical expertise to make the ship function. So it's a little bit of a challenge for us to take our pyramid society and do that with it a little bit in terms of structure, which is brought about by technical advancement.
And obviously on this particular ship as well, there's missile silos literally over there. There's anti-aircraft guns as well. These things have to be operational and usable when they're needed. So people must be managing that and maintaining that technology estate constantly, right?
Yeah. And that's how it's very interesting. It's how you measure our performance, because the ultimate measurement of this performance is how successfully we defeat and destroy the enemy. But we don't do that on a daily basis because we're an insurance policy, and a deterrent is, that's effective defence, is being a deterrent and insurance policy. So how we measure our performance is interesting in our world. It's all about how available we are for tasking and how ready, and that's that you assess that basically on the sort of the material state of the ship. How ready is she materially to go out and deliver operations, and then how well trained and how well my team perform, and the two together gives us an assessment of our operational capability, and that's done through our own internal sort of metrics of assessing how well trained we are, but also those external training bodies that we mentioned before who come on and give us an objective assessment. So that's how we prove our readiness, and then the ultimate test obviously is when you go into operations and you're called upon to press the button and make sure you do your job.
My favorite saying about my time in the service and in the Navy is, the ship's meant to go to sea, right? It's nice to be docked in Manhattan, and that's great, but the reality is out in the open ocean is where this ship is supposed to be.
Yeah.
We talk about that in business, right? Testing's great, beta's great, but it's not real. Unless you're in production, unless you're actually out in the wild, you really don't know.
Yeah.
And that's where you find out how good your crew actually is and how good of a leader you actually are.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, from your standpoint, looking over your illustrious career, do you like that? Over your career, what's some of the best advice that you've been given? If you look back and you were going to hand it down, because you have an XO, right? So that's part of your job, is to train the XO and work with them to do your job, right? And it's same with you, David, as the CEO, right? Our job as leaders is to build leaders and have them come up. So when you look back at your career, what's some of the best advice you were ever given?
I think some of the best advice I've been given is to delegate as much as you can and make people accountable and responsible.
That's really good, isn't it?
But it is. If you empower people, then they feel bought into the whole endeavour, and then they will work for you a lot better. They will feel much more engaged and part of the achievement of the ship. If you try and micromanage from the top, then people will just sort of, well, fine. If you don't want my opinion, I won't. I'll only work to rule, sort of thing. They won't deliver their best.
I mean, that's the difference between it becoming your vision and their vision, right? You know, if you can actually get everybody involved in that process and it becomes the thing that they're doing with you, then exactly, it'll take much more ownership of actually moving those things forwards. You know, we talk a lot about macro management rather than micromanagement. It's about exactly as you described earlier on, you know, setting the top level vision, but allowing people's creativity or their experience to actually deploy against the individual things in terms of moving it forward for their department. So it's just crazy how much commonality there is between business and everything else, right? So
well, this is what I loved about my time in the military and coming back and talking with folks that are in right now, because conversation parts come up that you're not expecting. You talked about EQ while we're up here, right? We're talking about not micromanaging. And I think folks have the wrong perception of what the military actually is like. I mean, obviously there's rigorous standards. You fail out here and lives can be lost. That's the reality. But you also train like crazy for your folks, and you teach them I know you're running drills nonstop because you're a commander and you used to wake me up all the damn time. But that's your job, right? Is to constantly train them and have them learn to think for themselves and be creative in those situations. And I think that would surprise people that are watching a video about this and seeing this come along. When you reflect back on your career, what's like the one thing, what's coming next? What do you look at and go, that's the next challenge?
So what's next for me? Well, yeah, this is a fantastic job. Being in command of a destroyer like this is something I've aspired to do for the whole of my career. So I think when I come to the end of this job, there's going to be a little bit of a sort of, well, there's going to be an anticlimax. I'm going to feel like I've reached the end of term, and it's like, what am I doing next? But actually, I think what's important is you learn all these lessons at sea. You can see how we can tweak the process and the policy in the Royal Navy. So I will probably end up in a staff job in headquarters, where I'll take all that knowledge from my time here in Dragon and try and take it into the headquarters and influence a little bit of change in the way we do our business as a Navy, not just HMS Dragon. So that's probably what's next for me.
You got to admit, it's really cool to say, what was your last command, HMS Dragon? And we'll get some good pictures of that. For those that are actually watching this and listening to it, where's the best place for them, one, to learn about this ship, this incredible ship, and then two, about you?
So if you want to learn about the sort of factual side of the ship, definitely go to the Royal Navy website. There's an HMS Dragon page on there. But you can follow us on Twitter. #BreathingFire is our hashtag. It's a good one, isn't it? It's a good one.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We changed 11FS to.
No, you can't. That's ours.
they've already got that.
But yeah, definitely follow us on Twitter. That you can keep up to date with everything that we're up to on there.
Very cool.
Well, as far as us, best thing to do, subscribe to this YouTube channel, subscribe to us on Twitter at FinTech Insiders, follow us at 11fs.com. David, best place to find out about you?
Always Twitter, at David Brear.
And at Sam Maule. Thanks for listening. One thing I got to encourage you to do, go out, actually go on to Apple iTunes, subscribe to our podcast, give us a 5-star review, and then mention how awesome this interview was on the HMS Dragon, the coolest ship.
Yeah, definitely say that.